The findings are so extreme that one child, a 4-year-old, is said to have had 26 orgasms within a 24-hour period. For Dr. Reisman, the obvious question was, where did Kinsey get such information?
And I looked at those charts and graphs. I can't tell you how long it took me to try to process what I was seeing. I said, this is the torture of children.
At the base of Table 31, Kinsey tells us that the data is based on actual observation of 317 males. Then on page 177 of the male volume, Kinsey writes, orgasm is in our records for a female babe of 4 months. But how would anyone recognize such a response in a young child? Kinsey wrote that among pre-adolescent boys and among younger females, orgasm is not so readily recognized, partly because of the lack of ejaculate.
And so I said, what did this man, this Kinsey, call an orgasm? Right? I mean, it's an obvious question, isn't it? I mean, first of all, this was not possible, but second of all, what did he call? Well, I saw he documented it on page 160 and 161 in Kinsey's book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. He described specifically what he called an orgasm amongst these children.
Kinsey defined orgasm for pre-adolescent children with the following description: a gradual and sometimes prolonged build-up to orgasm, which involves still more violent convulsions of the whole body, heavy breathing, groaning, sobbing, or more violent cries, sometimes with an abundance of tears, especially among younger children.
And he said there were 6 categories. He called them 6 categories of orgasm, and he had category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And included in these categories of what he calls an orgasm were screaming, writhing in pain, hysterics, especially among younger children. He put that in parentheses, especially among younger children, parentheses. He said that the children had convulsions. Those were his words. He said they fainted. He said they struck the partner. He called it the partner. This is the man who's raping the child. Okay. They struck the partner and tried to get away. And he said that those were all examples for him, of orgasm.
Kinsey made it clear that this data was supplied by adult observers, who were defined as pedophiles by Kinsey's own team members, as you will hear later on. Kinsey wrote, some males suffer excruciating pain and may scream. The males in the present group, by which he meant pre-adolescent boys, become similarly hypersensitive before the arrival of actual orgasm, will fight away from the partner, and may make violent attempts to avoid climax, although, he said, they derive definite pleasure from the situation. Kinsey biographer James H. Jones was a 1998 Pulitzer Prize finalist for his biography on Kinsey. In the Yorkshire documentary, Jones had this to say about Kinsey's description of child orgasm.
If you read those words, what he's talking about is kids who are screaming, kids who are protesting in every way they can the fact that their bodies, that their persons are being violated.
At that point, reading that, I said, the only person who could write that would be, number one, a pedophile or a pederast, because these were boys. It was homosexual abuse of boys. And a sadomasochist. That is, the only human being in the world who could call an orgasm something that involved people throwing up, I mean, having convulsions, fainting, screaming, crying. The only person who could do that is someone who experienced that themselves. And that had to be a sadomasochist. And the only person who could apply their sadomasochism to an infant and a child would be a pederast, a rapist. And that's what Kinsey did in that book.
Kinsey's own sadomasochistic tendencies have been documented by a number of biographers. James Jones revealed that Kinsey once climbed into a bathtub and circumcised himself with a pocket knife without the benefit of anesthesia. Another account of Kinsey's extreme self-abuse came about when his research was under investigation. Jones reports that after the Rockefeller Foundation withdrew his funding, Kinsey went to a basement, tied one end of a rope to an exposed ceiling pipe and the other end around his scrotum, then stood on a chair and jumped off.
The abuse that he inflicted on his organs, on his sexual organs, were very directly identified in his death. That was orchitis. That was a serious inflammation and disease that he inflicted upon himself that was basically involved in his final death. Now, the attempt to claim that Kinsey died of a heart attack is a perfectly reasonable thing to try to do. It's kind of embarrassing to say that the father of the entire sexual revolution, who has trained all of our sex educators in the United States of America basically, died because he had so abused himself.
If Kinsey's abuse had only been inflicted upon himself, his critics might be less likely to accuse him. But his abuse extended to children, the most precious members of our society. In this image, Kinsey seems to take a demented sort of glee in showing these young children a film of two porcupines engaged in a sexual act. He seems oblivious to the confused and even disturbed looks on the faces of these children. Was it this same lack of concern that enabled Kinsey to support and even encourage the most depraved sexual criminals?